Hi everyone. I was going to start by taking a few breaths. I find that very challenging just to be here and not say anything. Hey Mark. So today I want to talk about fasting, inspired by a friend who happens to be here. I want to talk about the relationship between fasting and deprogramming, because that's what we're all in a process of. Well, maybe not all of us, but many of us are waking up, and waking up is it's related to deprogramming. You start deprogramming, then you start waking up, and then you wake up even more and you realize there's even more to deprogram. And in my experience, fasting is great help for this process of deprogramming. And there's something about fasting, especially in these first few days. I'm fasting right now. I'm on day three. Woohoo! Of probably about a week. I don't know. We'll see. Definitely going to day 5 and then see what happens. Something about it that brings everything to the surface. The cravings, the emotions, the programming, the patterns. And it's not just about food. It's about all the things that we reach for. Yeah, I hear you. All the things that we reach for, right? When we're trying not to feel. Whether we consciously know that or not, usually we don't even realize that's what's going on. When you stop reaching for something to help you not feel, you start sitting with what's underneath, what wants to come up, and then something opens if you'll allow it, if you let it happen. Because fasting, just as a process, simplifies everything. Your life gets so simple, so quiet internally. You get to listen. And I can say that on day 3 of my fast right now, I am starting to feel this deep inner stillness that comes with fasting. It's something just quiets down internally. I mean, we live in a world that's engineered for constant stimulation, don't we? So, whether it's food or scrolling or, content, conversations, media, entertainment, there's always something to distract us. And these things are not bad in and of themselves, right? They often become a way, though, to avoid the self. I'm sure that you've noticed that. I mean, fasting, when you start getting into it, it reveals how deep the addiction to stimulation really goes. The body may be still, right? But the mind starts flailing around. And I know these first few days, there's almost a continuous impulse to oh, no, I'm not doing that. So there's a moment in fasting when you realize how much you're used to reaching for something. A snack. I'm just going to go make some tea, right? I'm just going to go grab a cup of coffee, a little sugar rush, right? To fill the space between things. And listen, I'm the first one to say I love a little coffee break. But it's not about judging the habits that we have. It's about observing, noticing, witnessing what's actually going on under the surface, right? So fasting is just totally not just about food. It's showing us where we've outsourced our beingness to doingness or consuming. I think it's really revelatory about time, energy, our relationship to time, to energy, and to consumption and compulsion. So when you stop preparing food, when you stop eating it, and when you stop cleaning up after it and thinking about it, well, so I haven't stopped thinking about it yet. I'm still thinking about it. But when I start thinking about it, I'm like, not an option. So I kick it out of my mind, right? But you realize how much time and energy is consecrated to food, right? I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat next, then I got to go, get it or prepare it, then I got to eat it, and then I'm going to clean up after, and then I'm going to, start thinking about, well, what's my next meal? I mean, it's crazy. You just start to see how much of your time and your energy and your attention is wrapped up around food, right? So when you fast, there's this giant gulf of emptiness where thinking about food, preparing food, eating food, and cleaning up after food used to be. You're like, I've got all this time. I've got all this space in my day that I didn't have. And that can be frightening, right? I don't lie. I'm like, okay, when I'm aware, I can't go make the coffee now, or I'm not going to go prepare for a meal now. A part of me gets like, oh, what am I going to do then with this spaciousness if I'm not working, which can be another distraction, right? So what am I going to do? So you realize that eating and everything around eating has become just another form of distraction, an interruption to the deeper rhythm of your being, which here on day 3 now I am starting to connect with again, right? This deep kind of quiet, inner quiet. The dishwasher's still empty after 3 days. It also simplifies, like everything you do. I'm like, well, I haven't opened the fridge, haven't touched the pantry, haven't cooked anything, don't need a kitchen right now. So, we eat for so many different reasons, right? When we're bored, sometimes we eat when we're hungry, right? When we're tired, when we want pleasure, right? Food is so deeply associated with pleasure. And when we don't want to feel something, right? Like, I'm just going to eat a bag of chips. I don't want to, and you don't even consciously know it, right? It's just like you feel the vague rumblings of, and speaking of rumbling, if you hear my stomach, it's occasionally making kind of loud gurgles, so I apologize in advance if that happens. But you feel the rumblings of, a feeling before it is articulable, right? And there's an automatic response to suppress it if it's uncomfortable, right? For most people. This is just it's part of our programming. So fasting can really, really bring that into sharp relief, right? It becomes very sharp. You notice that I don't have the option that I normally do, that I normally give myself to distract myself from whatever's coming up in me, right? It doesn't have to be something terrible or something. It doesn't have to be dramatic, but just like, the stuff that we're dealing with every single day on this planet in our lives, we got a lot on our plate. A lot, emotionally speaking. So fasting to me is really a sovereignty practice. It helps us observe the mind instead of being run by it. You begin to see in yourself all of these survival stories, right? All of these cravings, the emotional attachments to food, and the way that food often masks what we don't want to feel. And this is part of the medicine of fasting, aside from how good it is for you physically too. We'll talk about that as well. But I mean, it just strips away the illusion of need and dependency. It confronts us with it first, and then if we can breathe and stay in the process, and I haven't always been successful with that. But if we can do that, then it strips away this illusion that we constantly need to fill the space, that we constantly need to consume, right? When we aren't running to food or other distractions, we're just left with ourselves. And the ability to stand with that, not run away from that, is a big part of sovereignty. I'm enough. I don't need to distract myself. I can sit in my own stillness. I can be with what is. I don't need to fill the space to be okay, right? Consumption is really a cultural spell. It's a cultural spell. We are just, told that we constantly need to consume in some form. And consumption is framed as comfort, as identity, even as freedom. Right? And I'm talking about consumption, not just of food, but on all these different levels of consumption, right? Consumer society, and they call us consumers. Consumers. Yeah, my connection just went sideways. Okay. Are you hearing me now? Give me a little thumbs up if you're hearing me. Are you hearing me? Well, it said the connection went sideways for a second, but it seems to be back. All right, I'm not seeing anything, but I hope you guys can hear me. All right. So what was I saying? I was talking about freedom. Freedom. Okay, good. Freedom is maybe also in learning not to need, not to consume, and not to chase stimulation, right? To be able to say no to that. When we've clearly been entrained that that's just the way things are, that's just a part of life, and that is part of what defines us. And that's not true at all. And fasting breaks that spell. And even if we return to eating, we're no longer as unconscious in our consumption. The spell is broken. So, fasting is a form of deprogramming. It is not just physical, it's perceptual. It rearranges our relationship to everything that we've been taught to believe is necessary. Was we've been conditioned to think from the earliest age that we need to eat 3 meals a day, that, at certain times, like in France, I lived in France for 5 years. In France, you can't eat outside of certain times in many places. It's like lunch is from 12 to 2. If you didn't come during those hours, you missed it. Why? Because that's when lunch is. Right? And if you don't eat when everybody else eats, you're not going to get lunch. Right? And we've been also taught to eat regardless of hunger. We've been told that, being hungry is a bad thing. Like, oh, you're hungry? We should eat, Really? Why? And not to mention that consumption of food has been based on totally outdated and totally inverted ideas of nutrition. Big news in the United States is they just reissued the food guidelines, and I almost fell off my chair when I saw that they're actually beginning to make some sense. I mean, it doesn't seem that like the food pyramid that we had before, which was totally about being bought by the lobbyists, for certain big food interests. I was like, wow, I'm shocked. That's really good news. We're going in the right direction there, I hope. Anyway, so, the norms around consumption of food have been just drummed into us, about the fact that we need to eat in the first place. I'm not going to argue that right now. I just want to say, maybe it's not exactly what we've been brainwashed into, right? That we need to eat at certain times, that, that it's not okay to have an empty space in your stomach. Okay. We've been told that food equals energy. That's another big fallacy, that food gives you energy. And I remember as a child, when I would get up in the morning and have to go to school, and I was told I had to eat at 7 a.m., before going to school, I was never hungry. I never wanted to eat. I was told I had to eat. So I would eat whatever was put in front of me because I was told I had to. I wasn't hungry. I remember very clearly my body was like, ugh. It didn't want food, right? It was not ready for anything. But, they say, oh, well, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It gives you energy. No, food does not give you energy because digestion consumes enormous amounts of energy. Enormous amounts of energy, of life force energy. So that's a fallacy. Eating is also framed as a reward. Right, when I would get good grades as a child, and this is a beautiful memory, and I'm not judging it. I'm just saying, in this cultural context, like we would go to Baskin Robbins and have ice cream after a good report card, right? And all my report cards were good, so I would have an ice cream every time because, I'm joking, but I'm serious too because I'm referring to how. I operated inside the culture of consumption, right, as a good girl who followed the rules and did what she was told and was totally indoctrinated into that matrix culture, right? So food as a reward and the belief also that if you don't eat, then you'll get weak and sick or worse, right? That if you don't eat, you will die. Okay, now I know I'm challenging a lot of really deep-rooted presumption here that we all have. But that's why I'm suggesting that if you want to challenge that, you could try fasting. The first few days are the most challenging, and then something happens, something different, something new starts to come online. You start to remember. You realize that your body has deep reserves, that you don't need to eat nearly as often as you were told. You realize that hunger is a sensation, not an emergency. It's just another sensation. And you don't have to be ruled by it. You begin to wonder, well, why is food everywhere in our culture? Why is every social event centered around it? Why are we told that we must eat even if we're not hungry? And if you start to go against the rules in your family around food, oh my goodness, it's, people get very upset by that. They get very upset when you change the rules around eating, right, inside your family culture. It's disruptive. So you start to feel the tendrils of programming. You become aware of them and you start to feel them dissolving when you go through a fasting experience. I remember during my last extended fast, my body became free of pain at one moment. Like no aches, no inflammation, no heaviness. It was like a fog lifted and I felt really light and free. And then after I broke that fast and reintroduced even simple so-called clean or healthy food, the aches returned. I was like, that's very interesting. And that moment made something click in me. Like, what if we've been duped into dependency? What if food isn't what gives us energy? What if it mutes something, the subtler sources of energy that are available to us, such as sunlight, earth energy through grounding, right? We don't need to leap to the most extreme examples of, the autonomous people who don't eat or drink or even sleep. You might have heard of that. But just knowing that they exist, because the ones I've seen, I've researched that pretty deeply, I believe it's legitimate, that also breaks the spell, right? It shows that there's more than one way to live, and that maybe food is not the source of life. Maybe life is the source of life. And we've been scared into thinking that, if we don't eat food and if we don't consume, then we're going to be devoid of life. And it certainly brings up an emotional feeling around that when you're actually fasting. Now, I want to reiterate that I love food. I love celebration with food, right? Food, when it's part of the joy of fellowship, is a wonderful way to celebrate life, right? But it's not necessarily the foundation. You ever find yourself in a situation with people where there's no food, nothing to drink, it's just you? It's just you together? Sometimes there can be a little anxiety around them. Oh, we don't have anything to distract ourselves with. I don't have anything to sit with here, or to, right? So, what fasting reveals, some common psychological or energetic experiences that might arise when you're fasting is, emotional residue that surfaces when we stop soothing or suppressing with food. Resistance, definitely. Fear sometimes. What if I lose control? What if I get weak, right? Because you do get weak in the initial early stages of fasting as your body transitions from burning sugar to burning fat, right? But don't let that moment scare you into stopping the fast, because that's actually the moment where the magic starts to happen. What else might come up? The stories that we tell ourselves about needing to eat to be safe, to be grounded, and these shifts in identity that happen, like, who am I without my rituals of coffee or snacks, or, right? Because they're so comforting. Who am I without that? You can feel pretty untethered. But what opens as you go through the experience is, more time, more spaciousness, more subtlety, and eventually more energy, right? Because it's not being consumed by digestive processes, right? You do go through detoxification, cleansing that uses energy. You may feel deeply tired sometimes, right? And just need to rest. That's okay. But, as a rule, the energy that was once used for digestion is redirected into healing, right? And attunement. And you start noticing that. You get moments of sharp mental clarity. Wow. Right? Some of the biggest revelations I've had most recently came from fasting. And you feel a deeper sensitivity to frequency of food, frequency of people, frequency of places, right? It's like you start becoming this sensitive being again, who can listen, who can be still, who is in command and in the mastery of the moment, rather than subjected to it. I know that's a good feeling. This kind of links back to the previous theme last week about the heart as a vortex, not as a pump, because fasting allows us the time or the presence to tune back into the natural rhythms of the body and the field and the heart. And, when we get really still like that, the toroidal field of the heart becomes more perceptible to us. We're not caught up in the buzz, the digestion, the distraction, the loop of constant need. And this is why so many spiritual traditions recommend fasting, because it creates these conditions for coherence. However, caveat here, many spiritual traditions encourage fasting for clarity, for purification, preparation for communion with the divine. But there's a nuance that sometimes gets missed in this, that we have to ask ourselves, well, what really matters actually is the energy with which we're fasting. Like, where is my desire to fast coming from? Because, you know, fasting from an unconscious belief in your own unworthiness is a very different experience from fasting from a place of deep self-love, right? One is about punishment subconsciously, and one is about reverence for yourself and this divine vessel. So, you know, too often fasting has been framed as a way to atone for being human, a method of like self-denial as a being a virtue, a ritual of purification that assumes that something about us is impure, right? When we fast from love, from a deep honoring of the body, from a trust in the wisdom of the body and the wisdom of stillness, from a desire to listen more than to consume, then fasting becomes a really sacred, beautiful, empowering experience, humbling experience, but not in the sense of penance. It's presence, your own presence. It's not self-denial. It's self-remembering. Remembering who you really are under there. You're not trying to control your appetite because your hunger is bad or your desires are carnal and bad. You're witnessing those desires that arise and those sensations with love and letting things soften, right? You're not overriding your needs. You're asking, well, what is the real nourishment that I'm craving underneath the food? Because I can tell you, the times that I've broken a fast sooner than I intended because I just couldn't handle not eating and I was feeling really hungry and having a lot of cravings, when I broke those fasts with food, I did not feel the better for it. That didn't answer the need that was coming up at that moment. The food did not answer the need. So it clearly was not about physical hunger. There's something that is deeply craving true nourishment in us. And sometimes we can only find out what that is when we take away the so-called nourishment that we have been, told is the answer. Yeah. So I think that's all I want to say about that today. Aside from a gentle invitation, not everyone needs to fast, but if you are drawn to this conversation, if you have experienced fasting, if you're fasting right now, like some of us, if you are considering a fast, the deeper invitation here is to meet the emptiness of fasting without fear, or with fear, but just to be aware of the fear, right? To reclaim the space in you between desires, right? Between those impulses to reach for something, to try to solve something that way, right? I don't need to fill this moment. I can just be. So, suggestions might be to skip one meal and observe your thoughts, right? If it's not okay with you in your belief system to skip a meal, what happens if you do? What happens if you go counter culture, right? What happens if you choose silence over scrolling for 1 hour, right? For some people, that's really, really, really hard. Impulse to pick up the, right? What about going for a walk instead of snacking. You have an impulse to reach for food. What if you turn that into something else? Go for a walk or do something else that doesn't involve food. And practice presence with your breath when a craving arises, instead of just answering the craving by filling the hole, right? So these, again, I want to emphasize, this is not about like making food the enemy, because it's not. It's about observing inwardly in our inner universe what's going on, constantly reaching for something, constantly needing something to fill the space. And that's what fasting, when you commit to a fast and you're like, okay, that's it, I'm not eating, I'm just drinking water, or I'm just drinking urine, because that's what I'm doing, drinking. I'm on a urine fast, right? So what happens when you make that it's not an option, right? I don't have any food to reach for. That's not an option. What happens psychologically, right? So we're observing that. When that impulse, well, what do I do with this impulse? Where's it coming from? What do I need to listen to in me? Could I just breathe and be here, right? So those are some invitations, small but powerful sovereignty practices is what they are. That's what I have for you today. Thank you to those of you who've been here. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your listening. Thanks for your open-mindedness. I'm going to seal this space now with gratitude for your presence, gratitude for the body and its infinite intelligence, gratitude for all of the things that we have access to that are 100% free, that can teach us so much about who we are, really, not who we've been programmed to be. I hope you remember that emptiness is not deprivation, that it can actually be spaciousness. I hope you remember that hunger is not a threat to your being, but a signal to listen inwardly. And I hope that this has inspired you to remember that what you really need, what we all really truly need and crave, was never outside us to begin with. Thank you once again. Wishing you all a beautiful day and many blessings.